Meg Rudolph. Welcome back to the Deep Life Podcast.
Thank you guys so much for having me back.
To say we are thrilled to have you here is an understatement, and we can't wait to dive deep into these really, I think, important conditions that most of humanity is troubled with. So let's start off by laying the groundwork. What is anxiety and what is stress?
You are absolutely right in that this is something that feels like it's impacting all of us. So I want to start off by first with anxiety, making sure that we differentiate between anxiety and pathological anxiety, because I think that we've, as a universe, have just gotten so used to pathologizing everything. There's a certain level of anxiety that is going to be quite helpful for everybody, and everybody's going to experience. So whereas when we get into the pathological anxiety that I think it's important that we definitely touch on as well, that's going to look a little bit different. But in just simple terms, anxiety is essentially the feelings of worry, apprehension, and dread. Every single person experiences that at some point in their life, right? But when it gets to a point of where it is nonstop and is impacting our ability to function, that's when we're going to look more into the pathology of it. Now, as far as anxiety, you may think of it more in a cognitive sense. We often think of when we're anxious, we think, it's that excess worry. It's that the feeling like your brain won't shut off. It's never going to stop. It's kind of like spinning and spinning and spinning. But there's also that physiological piece as well, right? Where it's going to impact the way that our body feels, the way that we, are just feeling in general, whether it's a stomach ache, whether it's a headache, whether it's, feeling like we're having heart palpitations. So anxiety can kind of go from something that is very normal, healthy, what we need to be able to function as humans, to something that is then, okay, we need to seek treatment for this. So that's kind of anxiety in a nutshell. As far as stress goes, because I think that we often, they often seem like they go hand in hand, right?
Yes, that was going to be my next question. Yeah.
Right. But stress is something that's a little bit more short term. So stress is something that is more created by an external trigger, an external stressor. So think, when do you think you're stressed? Okay, I'm having financial problems. I'm having an issue with a family member. I'm having issues at work. I have a lot to do. Just something as simple as that. Oftentimes with stress, we find that it alleviates once the actual stressor is done. We finished that work project. We finished that school project. We've been able to accomplish our to-do list. We notice that those symptoms of stress that we were experiencing have alleviated. Whereas you see with anxiety, the difference is sometimes it doesn't alleviate like you would think it should, So those are kind of the differences between stress and anxiety. When people want to determine, am I stressed or am I anxious? You can kind of look at the timeline. Stress is oftentimes a little bit more short term. And anxiety can be something that's more long term. But that's not always the case. It's very different from person to person.
Sure. I feel like that makes a lot of sense. But I'm not sure if it makes a lot of sense to me, because I experienced anxiety pretty much my whole life. I'm getting much better at it, and stress as well. But you can differentiate the two. And I feel like you did a really good job. Can you have one without the other? Because they went hand in hand for me, but does that differ from person to person as well?
For sure. So it's not always, a textbook response. One person can have stress that doesn't then kind of snowball into the anxiety effect. You can have anxiety without a stressor. So think of anxiety as sometimes something that's more internal, whereas a stressor is more external. So you may have anxiety and it can be something that kind of just pops out of nowhere. You can just be living your life, having a good old day, and then there goes those thoughts coming to snowball and make a big impact on your day, big impact on your week, big impact on your month, your year. Whereas, that may be different with stress. Stress does not always basically mold into anxiety, and anxiety does not always go into stress, but they 100% can go hand in hand. But everybody is different in that sense. They are so intertwined, and they're so intertwined because of how they feel within our brains, how they feel within our bodies. So that's why we oftentimes, I know I have said this myself, you guys might have said this too, is I'm so stressed and anxious.
Oh, for sure.
I'm so stressed and anxious. But it's like, okay, which one are you experiencing? Are you truly experiencing both or one or the other? Because it could just be one or the other. So that's where we want to be careful with, okay, what's the trigger here? Is this more of a specific situation that is occurring in my life that is leading to me to feel stressed? Is this a specific event that is also leading me to feel anxious? Because what I don't want people to misconstrue is that can be a trigger that can lead you to feel anxious. It's not always internal. So that's why this is such a confusing topic, and it may not seem like it's so confusing, the topic of anxiety and stress, but it is, because it feels so similar within our bodies. I may be anxious, I may be stressed, and I'm going to react the same way. My brain may spin the same way. My body may feel the same way. I might have muscle tension. I may have trouble sleeping. So it's really difficult to determine, okay, what is going on here? What am I experiencing? What is happening? And then we kind of just feel like there's within our brains because we don't know what's going on. But 100% you can have one without the other, but they are incredibly intertwined, and it is difficult, and it takes a lot of insight to be able to determine what is going on and what is causing you to feel this way mentally, physically, emotionally, behaviorally.
Yeah, I feel like you did a really good job breaking that down as well. And it is kind of a complex subject, because until recently, understanding what it feels like in my body, not only stress and anxiety, but what fear feels like, what joy feels like, it's
Yes.
hard to differentiate the different conditions. So we'll dive into that. But before we do, because we know you've worked so much with kids and
Mm-hmm.
children, and we
Mm-hmm.
feel, unfortunately, Dan and I aren't parents, people know that, but all of our friends are, and we talk to
Mm-hmm.
parents that their kids are beginning to have to take, antidepressants and
Mm-hmm.
medication because they're feeling so stressed and anxious. So
Right.
tell us a little bit about how this shows up in kids. What is it like? What is the anxiety and stress like in children? Is it the same?
It's a great question. It can be the same and it can be very different. So one thing you'll see with kids is that it's going to be more somatic, more behavior changes.
Hmm.
Um, Children have difficulty being able to verbalize what they are experiencing. So you're going to see less of that self-report of anxious symptoms. They're not going to be able to sit here and tell you, hey, Dan and Elise, I'm having, a lot of racing thoughts. I'm having, I'm catastrophizing. I feel like this impending doom is happening. Like children are not going to be able to verbalize the way that we as adults are. So you're going to see more of those behavior shifts. You're often going to see a lot of irritability, difficulty sleeping, anger outbursts. That's a huge one. So oftentimes parents will, complain that, my kid is all of a sudden super angry. They're having these outbursts. They're maybe at sometimes becoming aggressive. They're throwing things. They're not telling me what's going on. I keep asking them what's going on, but they don't know how to tell me what's going on. And then they just lash out. So that's one of the things that you may see more with kids, just because self-report is so much more difficult for a little person to be able to do. They don't know how to put the words to the feelings that they're experiencing. They don't know how to put the words to what they're feeling inside of their body. So what happens is then the body kind of boils up, and then it just almost at times explodes. And we often see how we see a lot of this is kids being misdiagnosed. A kid can actually be experiencing some pretty significant anxiety, whether it's generalized anxiety or whether it's social anxiety, or, you name it. We could get deeper into the actual diagnoses that we frequently see with kids, but where they're often diagnosed with ADHD, placed on stimulants, but they're not actually experiencing ADHD, because one thing that's super common is the, decrease in being able to concentrate, really struggling to be able to focus. And then, oh, okay, well, the kid must have ADHD, so let's go ahead and, put them on medication, where we're not actually treating the problem. So misdiagnosing is huge. But I would say the biggest thing that you're going to see with kids is more of the behavioral changes than you're going to see as far as, them actually being able to self-report to you what they're experiencing. And I will add on to this with kids, especially since the pandemic, we've seen this significantly increase, especially just, because with anxiety, it's those feelings of, dread, doom, apprehension, fear, right? Like that's anxiety in a nutshell. With kids, global pandemic, parents anxious, I'm stuck at home, lack of socialization, not going to school, decrease in the ability to be able to interact with other kids. Huge impact on the anxiety rates that we've seen in kids.
Oh, for
Yeah,
sure.
that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. Do you think that the inability to kind of like explain and cognitively understand what they are feeling adds to the anxiety?
For sure. That's a really great question. Think about it for you. If you're experiencing something, I mean, even think about if you're, feeling a certain type of way, whether it's a medical condition and you were like, I have no idea what's going on with me. I've gone to all of these as an adult, we seek out help, right? Well, some of us do,
Mhm.
but like, you go to a doctor, nobody's able to explain what's going on with you. You have all these questions. You don't know what's going on. For a kid, it's not that easy. They may think that what they're feeling is what they're supposed to be feeling. They
Mm.
Yeah.
may feel, they don't know that that's, pathological. They don't know that that's not how they're supposed to be experiencing the world. So that then goes on and on and on and on, and then just continues to this roller coaster impact on their lives. And if we as adults or as the caregivers aren't being curious, aren't having those conversations with kids, aren't having that dialogue, making sure that, the internal feelings that they're having are healthy, then that then creates a huge
Mm.
problem within today's kids and youth. They don't know that what they're experiencing is not okay.
Yeah. Well, I also feel like a lot of adults do
Okay.
are experiencing
One
this.
and
Yeah.
that, and I was saying that I was thinking this, and I was thinking
Yeah.
the same thing. Like this isn't just
Yeah.
for kids. This is one of the biggest problems that we're seeing now with just adults in general. Is
Yes.
Mhm.
I'm going to keep it to myself. First of all, it's easier to keep it to myself. I don't want to share with the world what I'm going through. I know that this may not be normal. Okay, well then how is that working for you?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. For sure. I mean, I feel like how I lived most of my life. And I know that you've
Sure.
experienced this too, and Dan and
Yeah.
all of us. That's why I feel like I do have glimmers of hope. Like society is beginning, I think, to catch up because there's too much going on, and we now like are realizing the younger generations are feeling it. Like if we don't know how to cope and move this stress and move these emotions out of our body, how on earth can we help the little ones that are like going through this as well?
100%. 100%. You are absolutely right in that. And then we also see, let's kind of touch on social media for a second, right?
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh,
Social media has drastically changed the world. I mean, that's a fact, right? It's drastically changed the world. It's drastically changed how we communicate. It's drastically changed how we have relationships, how we interact with people, what we share about our lives. So it's kind of two-sided here. We're in this space where there's a lot of people that don't express what they're experiencing, keep it to themselves, live most of their lives suffering in silence. But now we're seeing this other side of social media where it's a drastic shift. Are we sharing too much?
Mhm.
Are we putting too much out there? Are the kids today seeing all of that? Are they
mm,
looking at those videos on TikTok? Are they falling into what we call the contagion effect, where you almost see it so frequently that then you think that you're experiencing it? And this is kind of
Mhm.
where at the beginning, when we introed of the difference between pathology of anxiety versus this is actually normal and healthy and helps you literally live your life. So we're seeing now with social media that we are over pathologizing a lot of things that are actually normal.
yeah.
It is so normal to experiencing anxiety and stress. Every single person on this planet has experienced anxiety and stress. And if somebody tells me I've never been anxious before, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost funny. We can laugh at it, right? Because anxiety we've been experiencing anxiety since we were cavemen.
Mm,
Cavemen are literally, we had to experiencing fight or flight to be able to
yes.
run, to be able to hunt for our food, to be able to feel if there's impending danger. We've all experienced anxiety. So for someone to say they haven't experienced it, but I think now we are seeing this huge kind of spectrum of never speaking of your problems, keeping it to yourself, and this suffering in silence, which is so incredibly dangerous to our bodies and our minds. And then the over pathologizing, and now it's a lot of people self-diagnosing, which then in and of itself can also be dangerous. So how do we then meet in the middle of this spectrum? How do we get from this wild end to coming somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought of it in those terms of it. It's almost like the nocebo effect, kind of, when
Yeah.
you're just, I didn't think of it like that, but that completely makes sense,
Mhm.
especially when young kids and teenagers are on social media
Yes.
90% of the day. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on so many amazing things that we like have notes on, and we're going to get back to like the state of the world, feeling it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But let's jump to how you said obviously everybody is experiencing some form of stress and some form of anxiety, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
Dan always says this, acute stress, like a workout, a really intense 45-minute workout, is
Yes.
great for the body.
Yes.
That's a good
Mhm.
kind of stressor. But tell us, when we're in a state of chronic stress, how that affects the body and why it can be, you know, detrimental if we kind of stay within that condition and almost attach ourselves to it, what's happening there. And with
Right.
anxiety, I feel like anxiety, sorry, I cut you off there. You're about to start
No.
talking. Just
No.
from
No.
like
No.
personal, like I'm trying to incorporate myself here. Like I knew I felt like I was chronically anxious
Mm-hmm.
24/7, but then
Right.
I had major stressors, like you were saying, like work, finances when you're young and out of college and not making a lot of money, like those things.
Right.
So they just added to it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just my personal experience with it. But yeah, if you could break down, acute and chronic and how and why that affects the body.
Sure. And Dan, that's an excellent example of when you experience a stress and it doesn't lead to anxiety.
Mhm.
That is a type of stress. You're putting stressor on muscles in your body, right? And during that time, you may be feeling a little bit of worry, a little bit of that apprehension, a little bit of, I want this to end because, oh my God, this hurts so bad. But when it's done, and you feel good, right?
Right.
And that's a
Yes.
really, really good example. I love that. Now, stress is, you've probably heard this term, stress is literally the silent killer, chronic stress. And it can impact so many different parts of our body. It's inflammation, the physical changes that happen with chronic stress, early aging. You may notice, as simply as if you're extremely stressed, look in the mirror.
Yes.
Look in the mirror. Do you notice physical changes within your face? Do you notice just, you might look a little bit more sunken in. You might, your bags under your eyes. Your skin is dry. Just simple changes within your face. It's so easy just to look in the mirror and go, oh my gosh, what's going on with me? Weight changes, weight loss, weight gain, heart attacks, cardiovascular concerns. Let's see, there's literally been numerous, millions, not millions, but thousands of studies of how stress has impacted the brain alone.
Mm.
The different impacts that it literally has on your brain, endocrine changes, neuroendocrine changes. The list goes on and on and on. Chronic stress is, in my opinion, is just the most dangerous thing that you can allow to continue within your body and in your brain and to not treat and address. And then we notice that stress is often then the frequent cause of when it becomes anxiety and then becomes an actual diagnosable anxiety disorder. So that's kind of where I think stress is frequently the beginning point for a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's usually an event that does occur that then does lead it into something that can become diagnosable. And I can say within my practice, I don't think I've ever really met anybody that there wasn't an actual external stressor or trigger that led to stress that then led to, anxiety in the body that then led to a diagnosable disorder. So stress is kind of just the beginning of it all.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Have you found like people? I don't think of the right way to word this because I feel like I observe people where it seems like they're almost addicted to stress, whereas like it becomes what they're more comfortable, as miserable as it is. It's like it's comfortable to them. They know that feeling, and maybe they're used to the the chemicals that are being produced as a result, and will seek out. There's people, it definitely
Yeah.
seems like they're always seeking out stress. And you said like catastrophizing earlier, where it's like
Hmm.
everything is not just like a little thing, everything turns into like worst case scenario, and they're like seeking it out.
And my question is that stress, or is that an actual person that has a diagnosable anxiety disorder?
Yeah.
Mm.
You
He's
know, and
probably thinking about
and
me
it
in this
could,
scenario, to be honest. He doesn't want to
Everything
say
honestly,
very
anything.
nice. Yeah.
Dan, this is
No, it's
many of
okay.
us,
Like,
and probably a lot of people listening, where there's always something, right? It always feels like there
Right.
has to be something. There's always something that, has to be worried about, has to be
yes,
addressed. There's something, whether it's not one thing, it's another. We've
Mhm.
tackled one thing, we've finished one thing. Okay, now I need to worry about the next thing. But no,
yes,
I think you are right in that there are probably a lot of people out there that do almost fuel off of that, where
Mhm.
you'll notice that with stress, the cortisol within our body is going to increase, right? They, kind of fueling off of that adrenaline and that stress
Yeah.
hormone, where it's kind of keeping them amped up, right? So I think that there are people out there that can probably function in just a constant state of stress and feeling this constant feeling of, oh my God, I got to do this. It almost feels like that in your body if you want to, physically look at it and describe it. But for sure. But then also my question would be, okay, I would want to know more about this person, and I would want to
Yeah.
know more about their symptoms. When did the symptoms start? How frequently is it happening? And is this something where it's like, okay, you actually may have an anxiety disorder, or you could easily just be somebody that is feeding off of stress.
Mhm. Gotcha.
yeah, absolutely. I think that that's what I did, and probably like
Mhm.
one of the examples. I mean,
I think it's very common.
yeah, it
Like,
is common for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but for myself, Meg, exactly like you're saying, it's almost like I think I knew something was really, really wrong with me when
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't simply sit and meditate for 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Like that gave me
Mm-hmm.
severe anxiety because I felt like I needed to be doing something else. And I was so uncomfortable
Yeah.
listening to the thoughts of perpetual, like just fear, anger, worry, stress within my head that
Right.
I couldn't do it. So that I think
Mhm.
Dan just knew that, like, I was like, okay, I'm not going to meditate.
Mhm.
I'm just going to go try and be as productive. And then it was almost like the only way that I could describe it for myself, because I can't emphasize enough, and you're doing a really good job. It's individualized for every person. But the reason
For
why I'm
sure.
sharing so much is like maybe someone else is experiencing something similar to this.
No, and
But
I love that.
yeah,
Mhm.
I thrive off of like task after task after task because I felt like within my brain, like that neurochemistry was just getting a dopamine hit. And that
Yeah.
dopamine hit was like making me feel like, oh, okay. It was like a high and then like the low of like, wait, there's nothing else to do. I'm just going to find something to do to like busy
Mhm.
myself.
What you experience in your body, it sounds like, is like that fight or flight
Yeah.
response without there actually being any type of impending danger going on. You
Yeah.
were simply sitting there trying to just meditate, and your body was telling you, I need to be doing this, this, and this. I need to go do this and this. And it's like it was just constant. Your brain wouldn't stop firing.
Mm-hmm.
And but there, if you look back on it, you beautifully describing how, like, but there was nothing that was actually needed to get done, to simply besides you sitting there and meditating and trying to calm your brain. But your brain wouldn't let you. That
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
cognitive piece was so strong for you that then it impacted the behavioral and the physical piece. And it was like, I got to get up and I got to go. I got to move. I got to go get all these tasks done, because then I'll feel better. Okay, well, I just did 15 tasks, but I don't feel better.
Mhm.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that the more that we've talked to people and like coaching people, meditation is one of the hardest practices to
Oh,
implement.
yes.
Mhm.
Oh,
You
yes.
might think that we'd be asking someone for like their unborn child. Like, I mean, it's really, but I get it. I
Mhm.
very much get it. Especially for
Mhm.
someone who has a chronic condition of anxiety and then the stressor of, I do also feel like for myself, there was a societal component of like, who has time to just sit for 10 minutes and like clear their head? And it's like,
Yes.
okay, well,
Mhm.
and this is why it's so important. And we're glad to have you on again. And we're going to continue these conversations. It has made such an amazing, beautifully peaceful, accepting, part of my life now that it's like, it is impactful. I can go through the day doing tasks quicker than I ever could. I'm at more peace. I don't rush through everything. I'm not constantly in that monkey brain, that like hamster wheel loop of the anxious, fearful thoughts that I was having.
Right.
So yes, like it's one of the best things that we recommend to people.
Yeah. Meditation is, I mean, I could speak from experience, is one of the most difficult things
Yeah.
that you can actually do and to give yourself. It is so simple, yet so complicated and complex. And just to sit there with your own thoughts is one of the most challenging things that we as humans can do. To literally shut it off without anything around you, even if you're in nature, you're in your home, there's no sounds around, to try to shut it off and to just become one with yourself is one of the hardest things. And you are absolutely right that society has told us that to sit and to take care of yourself and to give yourself that space of 5 minutes. Oh my God, am I being lazy? What should I be doing instead? I should be doing laundry. I should be doing the dishes. I should be cleaning. I should be doing this for work. I should be researching this. I should be calling this person. And you feel that instant sense of laziness just by doing something simply for yourself. And you're absolutely right about that. But yes, long story short, meditation is one of the hardest things we could ever do.
Yeah, we took a
very, very
there, but
yeah. It's just the idea that like 5 minutes of quiet is like a luxury and something that like you need to earn that is
like how dare you have self-care,
right?
How dare you take care of your body and your brain and your mind? How dare you nourish yourself? No, you're being lazy. You're not doing what you should be doing right now. And we could talk about that for 5 years. I mean, just the impact that society has had on the way that we think and how it's impacted, anxiety and stress in and of itself. But yeah.
Parenting can be stressful and even overwhelming, especially if you have an overly sensitive child. What if there was a way to better understand, guide, and nurture your child's unique sensitivity and emotional intelligence to set them up for success on their developmental journey? Rooted Rhythm's signature course, Tuned In, offers a transformational process for parents of highly sensitive, super feeling, wise, and empathetic children. Dan and I don't have children of our own, but we were both highly sensitive children growing up. And we know firsthand how difficult it can be to feel and process emotions in a productive and constructive way at such a young age. Recently, having gone through the Tuned In course, we both took away so much valuable information and practical tools we could utilize to reparent ourselves and to understand how to better use our sensitive nature to deepen our connection to ourselves as well as the world around us. The Tuned In course teaches parents concrete skills to meet their sensitive kids' needs in moments of intensity, increases their ability to connect deeply with their children, and supports a process of inner healing to shift how they relate to parenting. Each module offers unique grounding and embodiment meditations, lectures full of both evidence-based and practical content, and supplementary exercises to support in the implementation of new skills. Parents who have taken this course report walking away from the experience feeling relaxed in their being and confident to parent their children in a way that both feels most true to them as a parent as well as most supportive for their children. If this resonates with you as a parent or simply for yourself, we are excited to offer our listeners $100 off of this transformational course. Click the link in our show notes, which goes directly to the Rooted Rhythm Tuned In course website, and enter the discount code DEEPLIFE, all one word, to receive $100 off of the Tuned In course.
I do actually want to lean into that a little bit. Before I go there, I do want to say, like, we're talking about how difficult it is to meditate. I do want to point out that, like, once you do actually get into a meditation practice, it's unbelievably beneficial. And I don't want to blow over how, like, literally
No,
like
and
mind blowing it can be that it
100%,
completely change your
100%.
paradigm.
Hmm.
But it's almost like lean into that idea of living in a society where we think it's a luxury to have 5 minutes of silence. I think we have so much, we talked about social media a little bit. We have so much technology in our world.
Hmm.
And you got to look back at the way, like in the 50s and 60s, the way they talked about technology was about how easy it was going to make everybody's life, and everything was going to be automated and robots would be doing our work, and that we'd have time for ourselves and time for art and time for fun and recreation.
Right.
And it seems like it's going the opposite. And that
Yes.
with all this added technology, we have just more information faster. We have 24-hour email and text, and feel like we're always
Mhm.
obligated to be doing something, and we have less time
Right.
to relax. So I mean,
Right.
from my perspective, it seems like for sure life is so much more stressful. And I'm curious if sort of from a clinical standpoint,
Hmm.
there is more stress and anxiety in the world, or if we're just kind of more liberally diagnosing it
Right.
or talking
Right.
about it more, or if it's all of the above. Like, what's
Right.
your opinion?
Yeah. I think that's a great question, and you brought up some beautiful points. I think, first of all, the true prevalence of anxiety is pretty hard to determine, just based on the
Mhm.
fact that there's so much misdiagnosis. There's so many people that don't ever seek out help. There's so many people that are self-diagnosed when, it's so common now to self-diagnose versus actually seeking out help from a professional and getting a true diagnosis. It's so easy just to say, I have anxiety, I'm an anxious person.
Mhm.
But do you actually know the real criteria to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder? Now, that's kind of where I was touching on earlier about how, there is a level of anxiety that is normal and healthy, and we need it to be able to live and survive, right? Are you experiencing that? Are you experiencing these anxious symptoms in the context of a really stressful or traumatic event? Or are you legitimately experiencing something that is diagnosable and needs to be treated? Because anxiety is the most common of mental disorders out there. But it is very difficult to determine the actual prevalence of anxiety just based on those factors alone. Now, you brought up so many good points as far as, the social media piece. Are we more stressed than ever? Or is this just the world that we live in now?
Mhm.
Is it just because, we see all of these things on Instagram, people have TikTok, the amount of times that I see just on Instagram, like people labeling themselves as, when you have your name on Instagram, the anxious so-and-so. Is
Right.
it now just becoming so normal that we are just identifying with this feeling, this experience, versus actually doing anything about it and treating it? Are you more so feeding into the anxiety versus actually doing anything to help yourself and treat yourself and seek what you need? Now, I think there used to be, this is a fact, there used to be way more of a stigma surrounding mental health. There is still a severe stigma surrounding mental health and seeking out mental health treatment. Now, let me ask the person that has that account on Instagram that's titled what's called the anxious Meg, right? The anxious Meg. Have you ever actually sought out counseling? Have you ever actually gotten treatment for your anxiety? Or are you just kind of feeding into this? And then you have this social media following. But who is this helping? Is this becoming more, like I talked about, that contagion effect?
Yeah.
And where, now we see so many people that are, I'm anxious, I have anxiety, my anxiety, blah, 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 blah. It's like constant. But are you legitimately anxious, or can we be using this anxiety to our benefit? Can we be embracing this anxiety? Because I don't think now we are embracing it. Back, like I talked about before, the caveman days, we had to embrace the anxiety. It helped us survive, right? But
Yeah.
now we're treating anxiety almost like that, for lack of better words, a death sentence.
Yeah.
I have anxiety, and it's the worst thing in the world. And this is just me now. This is my life
Yeah.
now. This is
It
how I
becomes an
am.
identity.
It's an identity. It's exactly. It has become an identity versus how can I use this to actually better my life? How can this give me motivation to better my life? What am I missing? What am I not doing? What is my body telling me? Now, don't get me wrong. There 100% are many, many, many people out there that have a diagnosable anxiety disorder that does need to be treated. But how many people are you seeing on social media that are then fueling into this identity when that doesn't need to be the identity. That, in fact, isn't your identity. You may actually have a healthy level of anxiety and stress that's allowing you to keep that social media page so, booming, right? It's actually helping you, but you're almost treating it like it's this doom and this bad and gloomy thing that then other people are seeing, and maybe they're like, oh my God, well, maybe this is me now, and this is my life, and this is me, this is who I am. I'm just anxious Meg now. Like, hello, you might as well just introduce yourself as, hi, I'm anxious Elise, I'm anxious Dan, I'm anxious Meg. It's just this, it's just become so normalized. Where I think it can be helpful in a way, because again, it does reduce stigma in some ways, but it can also be quite harmful.
Yeah, absolutely.
In my clinical opinion.
Thank you for that. No, that it makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad that we kind of like touched a little bit upon like, how can we use this almost to our advantage? And I think that that's something that I want to highlight here, because stress and anxiety they are disorders, and they are conditions that can consume you, speaking from
Correct.
experience. Like, I get it.
Right.
But also speaking from experience, like, I don't want to live that way anymore. Like, I'm trying to turn that into like a purpose, and like to help people like almost unlearn about these things, because yes, it's also, unfortunately, we do live in a time where everybody's run by fear. So
yes.
To almost like have anxiety and stress is really scary, but then if other people have it and you can identify and become part of their tribe or their community, it's less scary. So then you just live in that, and it's like, but okay, but that's not going to be the best for your body, for your mental health. It eventually catches up to you. And I think a lot of the ways that it catches up to us, we're only starting to realize how it manifests in the bodies as dis-ease, DIS with that dash ease, and the cancers that it's coming through as. It's just, it manifests in the body's chronic stress as arthritis, like all of these things. Science is beginning to understand that, but I knowing what it's like to live in anxiety and stress and getting yourself out of it, like, I'm telling you guys, it's so much better than it is. I think that it also has helped me. I don't know if you can touch on this, like what you've seen with people, like it's helped me identify like who I truly am. Like you were saying, like, am I really threatened by this situation? Am I really this anxious constantly? Or are these thoughts not mine? Are they society? Are they like my friends and my teachers that I grabbed a hold of? Like my clergy people, like I grew up, like, wait a minute. Having the ability to identify my own thoughts and what's giving me a peace of mind has enabled me to like discard the other thoughts. I'm like, wait, that's not mine. I think I inherited that from someone or something. Social media or movies, books.
Yes, 100%. And we are so focused now, and this isn't even just now, but I think we're recognizing it more now, just based on technology and social media, how much we are comparing ourselves to others. And okay, what does happiness look like? What does the perfect life look like? Who are we comparing? Like, we are always constantly comparing ourselves to other people. We constantly want to have what this person has. We're constantly wanting our problems to be less than this other person. Well, if their problems, internally, if their problems aren't as bad as me, well then, or their problems are worse than mine, then I'm doing pretty good. Like that, it's almost this weird, twisted way that we are thinking. And you brought up, how are these thoughts even mine? The fact that they may not be your thoughts. You may be just viewing and seeing and experiencing so much of others that you don't even know what's coming from, what's internal. Is this external? Is this actually a stressor from social media that's then impacting your thoughts and the way that you're behaving? Or are these internal thoughts? Is this really within yourself? And that's why it's so hard to actually sit and figure out, okay, what am I actually experiencing? What am I truly thinking? Those things are just difficult in and of itself to be able to do, to actually determine what you individually are experiencing, what is yours, and owning what is yours, and then determining what the next steps are to better yourself. Because you do not need to live with this. This does not need to be your identity. Am I going to sit here and say that, anxiety is just, the most curable thing and you can just flip a switch and there's, something that's going to help everybody? Absolutely not. If you have anxiety, you're going to probably have anxiety symptoms the rest of your life, and that's okay. But how do you use it to your benefit? And instead of thinking, okay, well, this is just how I'm going to live. This is just how life is now, because that's when we see, that's when it turns into something that can be quite dangerous. Feelings of hopelessness, anxiety and depression often go hand in hand. Are we seeing it in, feeling, thoughts of suicide? So I think it's incredibly important that we don't just accept that this is how life is, because it doesn't have to be that way. There's always help. There's always ways that you can treat this. There's always ways that you can get out of this. It's never just something that we need to sit there and accept. But the first piece is actually accepting that this is what's going on with you. And Elise, you've done a beautiful job of describing how this all kind of came to fruition for you and how you really realized, okay, this is what's going on in my mind and my body. And now what am I going to do about it? Am I going to sit here and just think this is me now? This is how I'm going to live? Or do I want to actually better my life and feel happier, feel more peace, feel internal peace? Because I would say anxiety is probably is the best way I can describe it. And I've used this with clients is it's internal chaos.
Wow. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's absolutely internal chaos where you feel like it's just never going to end. And you feel your blood pressure rising. You feel your brain spinning. You feel the sweat coming. You feel the headaches. You feel the stomach aches. You mean, it's everything. It is literally just internal chaos. And that is the best way to describe it. And if you feel like that you are experiencing that, then I would, strongly encourage you to then take the next steps to be able to get yourself out of that, because you don't have to live a life of internal chaos.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's no way to live.
No, definitely not. I feel like you so beautifully put that. That was honestly going to be my next question. I feel like you
perfect
seamlessly
segue
into it, because okay, say you are
I love a
experiencing.
smooth segue.
Well, I think I started off say there is a person who's experiencing anxiety or experiencing a really big stressor in their life, that it's almost like it's not turning into it's not that acute stress. It's like, oh shit, wait, yeah, I have impending debt is a good one, because I think a lot of American, that is a stressor that I think is universal for a lot of people. Sure. It's kind of I know this is individualized, but kind of what's next? How, I obviously I spoke from my experience, but I am an anomaly. I'm different.
That's for sure.
The crazy me wanted to sit with my insane thoughts, but that's not always what people are ready to do, because I will say, and I would actually love your opinion on this, Meg. Sure. That almost it can put you deep in a depression if you sit with those bad thoughts. I was willing to do it because I was I was I'm just jumping over this edge. But have you saw that? I guess maybe talk about some different ways people if they're experiencing stress or anxiety, what may be the next step, and if it's not that great to really sit if you're not in a space to do that.
Right. And most of the time, if you are in this space, you're not in a healthy headspace to go and just sit with your thoughts, right? Because then it spins and spins. So this is where you need to use your support. And this is probably the hardest step, because what's the number one thing that we often do when we're experiencing, internal chaos is we isolate, we stick to ourselves, we don't seek out help, right? But the biggest thing that you can do to help yourself, instead of just self-diagnosing yourself and instead of self-medicating, is actually verbalizing what you are experiencing. talking to a loved one, talking to a significant other, talking to friends, talking to your pastor, talking to a teacher, talking to whoever you feel that you can confide in. That's your next step, talking to somebody and then figuring out, okay, is happening with me currently? Is this impeding my ability to live my life? Because this is the biggest thing here. Is this, and this is where we get into, we've basically been talking about pathological anxiety most of this time. And I want to make that clear to people. The healthy anxiety is something that we all experience, but when it's impacting your life and your ability to be able to function, to go to work, to see your friends, to be in relationships, social, occupational, educational, behavioral, every single aspect of our life, if it is impeding your ability to feel like you are living your life, that's when okay, light bulb, something's going on here and I need to take the next steps to better myself. So I would say that's the biggest thing. And sometimes it takes you verbalizing to somebody else instead of sitting with your own thoughts. Okay, yeah, something's going on here. Or maybe this was actually a situation where I was really stressed and I needed to talk about this, or I had this big stressor and I needed to accomplish it and knock it off my to-do list and I'm good. Okay, well, that's great. But you may realize that when you do verbalize these thoughts to somebody else of what you are experiencing, that yes, it could in fact be a diagnosable anxiety disorder. So the biggest step is talking to somebody. And then, as a therapist, anybody can benefit from therapy. Anybody can benefit from therapy, especially those experiencing anxiety. Because anxiety is something that can just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat at you.
Mm-hmm.
And eat and eat and eat and eat some more, right? It's just going to continue to go and go at you. And every single piece is your brain, your body, every single bit. You are now living a life that doesn't feel like yours because you don't even know how to function in it anymore. So that's where it becomes really dangerous, when we just identify with it versus actually doing simple things to be able to live with it. Because yeah, you are going to live with it, and yeah, you can overcome it, but you actually have to take those steps to do so. When, seeking out the consult of others and people that you love, and then knowing, okay, maybe it's time to actually seek out counseling. Counseling can be helpful for anybody, even if that's the first person that you want to seek out. Maybe you don't feel comfortable talking to those people in your life and you'd rather talk to somebody unbiased that you don't know. Huge. Yes, absolutely. That's just as good.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Were you gonna say something?
No, I was just gonna say, it seems like just in general, like talking about things just tends to help life in general.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's interesting because in the beginning we were talking about like children who can't do that.
This is what I was
about to say. So that's exactly what I was about to say.
It just naturally lends itself to almost imply that as we grow, part of wisdom is a part of understanding what's going on in your body and in your mind and what to do with it and being able to articulate that and share it and discuss it.
Exactly what I was about to say is I'm sitting here talking about, okay, how your next step needs to be seeking out consult from somebody that you love and trust, or an unbiased person like a therapist. A kid doesn't know to do that, right? So what do we do next with that? What do we do, as parents? How do we help our kids? Well, you have the responsibility to help shed that light and help explain what they may be experiencing in their bodies, and help guide them to what could be next to helping treat their anxiety. Anxiety is very frequently, if not always, usually developed within childhood.
Yes.
So we often see, I was an anxious kid, I'm now an anxious adult. I'm an anxious adult, right? So, and I hear that all the time. I see it all the time. Like, oh, I was an anxious kid, I'm still an anxious adult. Well, when you were a kid, you had no idea what was going on in your body. And now as an adult, you're just learning about all of these things. Maybe some people don't even know still what's going on within them. And those behavioral outbursts that you were having as a kid when you were anxious, you may still be having it as an adult, because you have no idea what's going on inside of you.
Exactly. Yeah. That is what I was going to bring up about the kids, because when you discussed that at the beginning, you used the word somatic, which is in your body. And I think as I'm beginning to speak more about this, the light bulbs are going off, because exactly like you say, like it's very hard for me to pinpoint like the exact time the anxiety started within me or the stressors because they just accumulated. But I also
Mhm.
can't pinpoint exactly what it was that alleviated it either because I am constantly changing, and within this, spiritual wellness journey, there's a lot of
Sure.
different modalities I've incorporated. But the
Hmm.
somatic one I think is really interesting. And it's almost like kids intuitively know that they need to release this energy from their body, like throwing things. I'm not condoning that by any means, but they don't know what to do. So they're either pounding a pillow or, throwing a tantrum because they're trying to release the stagnated energy that needs to get out. And
Right.
what I've found too is interesting. I'm curious if like, because we're talking like we're no pun intended, we're talking about it to people, which I
Right.
think is really good. But one of a couple things that I think that really helped me because I had classified myself as an anxious person and felt so uncomfortable at times,
Hmm.
putting myself in a little bit of uncomfortable situations helped rewire the neural pathways in my brain. And by uncomfortable situations, I'm not saying like standing out in the middle of the street during like rush hour traffic, but
Right.
deep, hard breath work and like
Hmm.
cold plunges and like really ice cold showers. That, from my understanding clinically, is really good for anxiety and depression. And I
Hmm.
feel like having that cold water on your body for just 30 seconds to 60 seconds, it is so unbelievably uncomfortable. You innately, intuitively have to talk yourself into, you're okay, you're safe. You connect almost with your body to
Hmm.
train your mind that like you're safe in this situation. Or like when you're doing really deep breath work, you are releasing a lot of that energy that's like stagnated and stuck within your body. So it's like an extra release. And I feel like
Right.
maybe that's why I felt more comfortable sitting with the uncomfortable thoughts because I was putting
Yeah.
myself slowly into uncomfortable situations.
It's like developing a skill set.
Yeah. Again, I am not a
Yeah.
professional. I'm not saying that this is correct for anybody else, but it's interesting. I'm curious if you've worked with any modalities like that.
Well, I think what you're describing is you're essentially giving your body, you're giving a shock to the system, right? Like you're almost kind of
Mm.
like a reset. So when you're immediately putting yourself into ice cold water, there's going to be a lot of changes that are happening within your body,
Yeah.
right? Everything that was happening before, that doesn't even matter because all you're worrying about is that ice cold water. You're
Mhm.
giving yourself a shock. Now, that can be extremely helpful to people. I know cold plunges are now super, super popular. I personally have never done one, and I'd be curious to try to see kind of what that shock to the system feels like. But it does impact your body so much that you are almost kind of giving yourself a quick rewire
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
if you want to kind of think of it in simple terms. But there's also so many things that we can do that we don't even think of that are so simple that can help our anxiety. I know we talked a lot about meditation before without even needing to. And I think one thing that has been really helpful for myself and also for clients that I've worked with is not even just starting at meditation, but doing something that's called um, a body scan. And when you do a
Mm-hmm.
body scan, this really helps because when you go to meditate, you're alone with your thoughts, right? But if you're doing a body scan, and I'll kind of explain what this is, you are focusing on one piece of your body at a time. And you can start from your toes all the way to your feet, to your shins, to your knees, to your thighs, all the way up every single part of your body. And you're focusing on relaxing every little piece of your body up until you get to your brain. And when you get to your head last, it's amazing to see the difference that you would have if you started actually with your head first. Because if you start at your toes, or even if you just decide to start at your fingertips and go down and then kind of work your way back up, it's really up to your comfort level and what you want to do. But if you sit there and focus on every little piece of your body and relaxing every single little piece back before you get to your head, which is the part that won't shut up, for lack of a better term, it's amazing when your body is relaxed what you can do with your mind. And I think that's a great first step for somebody that's like, maybe listening, that's like, wow, I really think that meditation could be something for me, where I really think I do need to be alone with my thoughts, but I'm scared to be alone with my thoughts. Okay, why don't you start with touching on the body first, touching on the little pieces of the body and relaxing those before you get there? I will say there's a lot of great videos and even books on body scans. Like you can do a quick body scan YouTube search and actually listen to it, and it will do it for you. Because sometimes if you do it internally, you may get stuck up here versus when you want to be stuck on your kneecaps. So just little things like that. Diaphragmatic breathing, how it impacts the parasympathetic nervous system. Actually doing belly breaths. We as we were kids, we learned to breathe. When you breathe and your shoulders go up, you're not doing anything to help you. You're stressing your body more, right? A simple belly breath, putting your hands on your belly, breathing in and having your belly go out, the magic that it will do for your body to calm you down. I mean, something so simple. And I would say for any parents that might be listening and they feel that their kids need some help, calming down or learning how to be able to cope, one of the biggest first steps that you can do is teaching them how to do a belly breath versus, okay, do a deep breath in, because when they're doing a deep breath in, they're going to go, okay, now you tense everything up here and you are now stressed so much more versus actually releasing. So there's so many simple things, we think of, the cold plunges, but maybe even just look at your diet, managing your diet. Are you a person that has decided that you are going to have one gigantic meal a day? Okay, well, maybe that works for you, but then also maybe keep track of how you're feeling throughout the day, because you are impacting your blood sugar so much when you're doing that, then that is impacting your anxiety. Simply journaling and jotting down what you're experiencing at all aspects of the day. It's such a simple thing. Actually taking out a piece of paper and a pen. I encourage you to take out a literal piece of paper, like an actual piece of paper versus sitting on your phone. Get away from the screen. Jot down what you're experiencing in your mind, in your body, where you're feeling it, what happened. What was there a trigger? Were you sitting and this just kind of came out of nowhere? Okay, that's really helpful data. That's also extremely helpful data to have, especially for somebody that's interested in starting therapy, is just journaling what you're experiencing. And then bringing that to your therapist of like, I've actually kept track of how I'm feeling throughout the day and what my mind and body is doing and what were, precipitating events and all of that. And it can be so enlightening to figure out what is really going on with you from a clinical perspective. And just being really intentional is huge. And Elise, you've done nothing but explain how you've grown into this new phase of life of just being intentional with yourself and making sure that you are doing these things to better yourself. Because with anxiety, like I said, it's internal chaos. The only thing that's going to help you get out of that chaos is intentionally doing something to bring yourself out of it, right? No one's going to do it for you. Nothing's magically going to shift for you. You have to do it yourself. You have to be the one that's going to pull yourself up and get yourself out of it and figure out what's going on with yourself. The perseveration in your brain, and this is another, I don't even think we touched on, what we call in the clinical world is perseverating, when your brain will not stop, but you keep focusing on one thing and it never ends. The perseveration isn't just going to stop. You have to figure out ways to intentionally get yourself out of it, whether it's picking up a piece of paper and a pen, journaling, doing some guided imagery, getting into meditation if you are at that point, managing your diet, because it's so easy to fall into that consistent hole that is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And before I end on that tangent, I think it's super important to also talk about we could talk about the do's, but we should also, the don'ts are super important too, because, this is where the internet gets a little scary, right? And so social media gets a little bit scary of people telling you how to treat your anxiety. Now, the common things that people tell you to do, like maybe we should be doing the opposite, like self-medicating is one of the most common things that we're seeing, the frequency that people use drugs and alcohol, the frequency that people use marijuana, thinking that it's actually helping their anxiety when it's actually doing the opposite for you. There's been a lot of data to prove that marijuana, in fact, worsens anxiety than it does, improve it. It's going to impact your sleep. It's not, it's going to do the opposite. So we're often doing things that we think that we are helping ourselves, when you are actually hurting yourself, maybe you're staying awake all night because you're having anxiety about an upcoming exam, or you're having anxiety about an upcoming work event or something like that. You are staying awake. You are immediately hurting yourself. The importance of sleep, especially in somebody that's experiencing anxiety, is huge. Having consistent sleep, having a sleep routine, not just I'm going to go to bed at this time at night. Having a literal routine for sleep is so incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Putting your phone away, having rituals before bedtime, doing the same thing every night to help yourself prepare for sleep is huge. We often lull ourselves to sleep by the light of our cell phones. I'm guilty of it. You guys are probably guilty of it. And then it does the exact opposite, right? So having a consistent sleep routine, and just being really mindful of how you're treating your body. How are the ways that you're treating your body impacting you? Stuffing your face once a day, putting all of these chemicals inside of your body. How, again, simply, how is that working for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I love as we're wrapping up here, all of these modalities and ideas on how to, universally, at least anybody can do these, as we've
Right.
been talking and you've said throughout the podcast, like it's going to be individualized, but starting with a few of these things, everything that you mentioned, other than, therapy, is free. You have
Mhm.
everything at your disposal to do.
Right.
And to end, like, I'm so glad that you brought up that, like, we have the power within us. Like, the solution is us. It's you, it's me, it's Dan. So often, like I had brought up before, we live in a world of constant fear and worry. And it can be really scary and it can cause anxiety and stress. But the one common denominator is us as individuals, as humans. Certainly there are certain diagnoses and maybe you do need external help in that way, but it all starts with us. Like, we have the power
Right.
to choose differently, to do one thing that's out of the ordinary, that's going to aid in the health and wellness of our being.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's why I get so excited about it, is because I have felt the effects of it. And I know that you have too, and you've seen it, and like
Mhm.
Dan also is witnessing it. So it's like,
Mhm.
all I want is for everybody to feel good and like live a happy life and also be able to like celebrate everybody else's life, as opposed to like the comparison game that we were talking about. It's like, we can do this, like, as a community, as a race, as humanity, and like thrive instead of survive.
100%. And anxiety is literally built out of fear. And you've talked a lot about how we live in, like, how the world is just based out of fear. And yeah, and that's exactly what anxiety is. And we are our own biggest advocates. And I think we don't realize that enough. We are our biggest cheerleader, our biggest advocate, and we are the person that is going to better ourselves. Now we build connections, we have relationships, but the power that you carry within you to be able to better yourself and to figure out what's going to work for you, to be able to love your life and to feel that you can stop playing the comparison game. I mean, it's so incredibly powerful. And I love hearing your story and your journey, Elise, and just how much you've learned about yourself. And I think this is where it's so amazing and so powerful and so beautiful what we can do for ourselves. And like you said, there's so much of it that's just free. Like,
Yes.
yes, therapy is there for everybody. It's always going to be there. But the amount of things that we can do every single day just to better our lives that are at your disposal, that's up to you to do. No one else. No one else is going to do that for you.
For sure. Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it. I think that I am beginning to just kind of come out of my cocoon, and like I was saying, is I'm self-discovering what I actually want, what I truly like want for life. And as I want
Sure.
everybody else to do the same. So yeah, this has been tremendously insightful. I mean, you are a wealth of knowledge. I mean, we touched upon a lot with stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
But before we let you go, did we miss anything? Is there anything that you lastly think is important that we either forgot or didn't touch upon, or?
I think we touched on a lot. I would
Yeah.
say I encourage people to really take a deep dive and think, what if you feel that you're experiencing anything that we've touched on or talked about, figure out, is this something that you can actually embrace and accept and use to your benefit for motivation? Or is this something that you do feel is more clinical and you do need more help with? Because it's like we talked about in the beginning, it's such a wide spectrum, and we don't need to constantly identify as just being anxious and you're stuck with it. Use it. You need it. You need it to better your life. You need it to motivate you. Because if we didn't have stress and anxiety, what would we be doing? We'd have nothing to motivate us. We'd have nothing to motivate us. We wouldn't be seeking out careers. We wouldn't be seeking out, having families. We wouldn't be seeking out going on, exploring the world. This is what stress and anxiety was created for within our bodies, to help motivate us. So this doesn't always have to be something negative, but I do encourage you to really take a deep dive. And if this is something that is impacting your ability to function, then there's so much out there that can help.
Beautiful way to end it, Meg. Thank you for returning. I have a big feeling this will not be the last time that you're on the show, because there are so many different avenues that we can touch upon within your clinical experience and helping others. So thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, you guys. This was a blast.